There's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
It's the Sitting Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
Oh, no! Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball! No crying!
Welcome into the Sittin Sportside podcast on 1045theteam.com and youtube.com/team1045. My name is Eric Handeman, and I'm bringing you my preview of the National League Central Division. As the timing of this podcast on March 20th, we have the National League East podcast up along with the American League Central Division. So this is the conclusion of this podcast. We'll be halfway through the division previews on the Sittin Sportside podcast. There's also a podcast up there to get you ready for your baseball draft, your fantasy baseball draft, that is, and give you my value picks in that one. That's up on youtube.com/team1045. We have a great link now, a playlist on our YouTube page. And if you go to 1045theteam.com, find the podcast tab and click on the Sittin Sportside podcast. They're all there for you, ready to go. So I'm here ready to go, giving you my predictions of the National League Central Divisions. Let's go for it. Starting with the fifth team in the division, and that is going to be, for me, the Cincinnati Reds. Look, they've been a pretty bad team for a few years now, and Joey Votto's just sitting there saying, you know what? I remember when we were good and we made the playoffs, and we were part of not only the playoffs, but back-to-back playoff appearances. They had a big loss in 2012 to the eventual World Series champion Giants. They lost in the wild card game, I believe, the following year in 2013 to the Pittsburgh Pirates, their division rivals. And ever since 14 and we saw Frazier leave, and I believe the offseason of 2015 going into 16, it really definitely just went downhill, and this team hasn't been the same. And they're currently in rebuilding mode, which isn't the worst thing, but it's also not the best thing if you're a Reds fan. You still have Joey Votto, though, who I think probably is an underrated guy, not only because he doesn't really get the MVP talk that he deserves, but if you really don't know how much this guy gets on base, it's absolutely insane. Leads the league. He usually leads the league in walks, or is it definitely at least top 5 every single year. So Joey Votto, don't sleep on this guy, because he really is. I believe he was MVP in 2011, so it's been a while, but he definitely deserves some recognition for a 454 OBP last season and a career 428 OBP, if you were wondering, for his career. So he's a really good player. Joey Votto is another good player that we've seen from this offense his last couple of years. Adam Duvall has been very good. We all know about the speed in center field and Billy Hamilton, but really past that, there hasn't been another guy who's really made a household name. I know Duvall has been the all-star. That's why I have him in the household quoting name. Maybe not household. That's a little too far. But same thing with Billy Hamilton. If you're a baseball fan, you know how fast he is. But they're still not guys that you're well known. They're good players. So the top 4 in this lineup are pretty good. I think if you even add Eugenio Suarez, maybe he'll be batting 5th. He's a pretty good guy in this lineup as well. He batted pretty high last year, around 280, 290, and so he's also a very good hitter. Scooter Gennett at second base, he had a 4 home run game, so don't sleep on Scooter. I mean, Scooter had some pretty good at-bats, games last year, and really was underrated for them. And then at shortstop, Jose Peraza, I think you look at him, as he was supposed to have a really good year last year and didn't really have the year we were expecting from him. The former Atlanta Brave, top Atlanta Brave prospect, now doing great things at times for the Reds, but really could be a little bit better, and we'll see. I think he's projects to have a better year this year, maybe higher, closer to 300, and then also to the stolen bases could get past 35 to 40. So you add that to Billy Hamilton, this team could lead the league in stolen bases, or at least have the biggest impact in their games. Right field, the last position we haven't really talked about other than catcher, is going to be a platoon from Scott Schebler and Jesse Winker. And I'm not going to really talk much about Schebler, but who had his home runs. I mean, look at the field that they play in, Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. That's a hitter's ballpark, more times than not, the home runs that come out there probably aren't home runs. I don't want to say more times than not, but a lot of them are not necessarily home runs anywhere else. So that's why I look at him, and then Jesse Winker as well, as guys who maybe don't project or haven't projected in their minor league careers to be, 30-plus home run guys, but at this ballpark, they do project to possibly get to the 20 to 25 range in the season. We saw Schebler do it, and I think Jesse Winker, who is a guy maybe based on his minor league career, say okay, 15 home run guy. But playing 81 games in Cincinnati, I think you look at Jesse Winker and you could say, all right, he's hitting for a high average, and he could get to 20 plus home runs. So I think eventually Jesse Winker, whether it's due to an injury to anybody, because Duvall can also play first base, so even Votto, due to an injury, maybe he'll get more playing time. Maybe that's the reason. Or I just think it's because he's a better player. He'll get everyday at-bats probably sooner rather than later. And then last but not least, Tucker Barnhart, Devin Mesoraco, the two catchers, have been good. But once again, is that just because they play in Cincinnati? Their numbers have been good because they play in Cincinnati in terms of the home run numbers. The rotations where it gets dicey is why I have them in last place. And even though the team I have in fourth place, this doesn't really project to be that much better offensively. I think the offense might be better for the Reds than my fourth place team in this division. I think the pitching is what really kind of is what's not great in the Cincinnati team. We see Anthony DeScalfani continue to be injured. He's injured again. That oblique injury coming back to haunt him. Homer Bailey, when has he had a full season? It's been a while. I mean, you might remember Homer Bailey from his back, two no-hitter bids, and so, earlier in his career, but he's long removed from that. I don't know. You can't really trust him to last the entire season. Brandon Finnegan also is battling injuries, so that's your top three right now, all kind of injury prone. I love Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo might be the best young pitcher. Maybe in the entire game, it's actually going to be pitching right now. He's one of my biggest bright spots in terms of starting pitchers that are young and you might not know about. He has the same name as a previous second baseman, right, Luis Castillo. But he throws really hard and he can strike out a lot of batters. So he will be their ace, if not already are their ace for the 2018 season. Other guys who are going to come in, I think that I'll give you the one that I like the most, Tyler Mahle. He had a really good season in the minor leagues last year. I want to say he had a no-hitter of his own in the minor leagues last year. So he came up and pitched decent with a 2.7 ERA, I believe. So last year, we're looking at a guy who could possibly come in and actually do a really good job for the Reds if he actually gets it out of spring training because of the injuries to DeScalfani and Finnegan. Past that, Sal Romano, Robert Stevenson, and Amir Garrett, all guys who have shown flashes of being good in the majors. But after starting off really well last year, Amir Garrett absolutely... what hit the fan. He had above a 7 ERA for a stretch there, for a good 5 or 6 start stretch there. So he was pretty bad at times. Robert Stevenson hasn't been able to. He's more of a contact pitcher, and sometimes he gets a little too hard. Same goes for Sal Romano. So there could be okay, but they're just not trustworthy enough to be good enough to get past the 5th place in this division. That's it. That's all I really have on the Reds. I love their closer though as well, Raisel Iglesias. So there's a lot to like about this team in terms of being young and having good players. Michael Lorenzen as a setup man, I like him there as well. But past that, their bullpen isn't the greatest. David Hernandez, so Jared Hughes, I believe. It's just not. I don't like it. I don't love it, but it's there, right? What are you gonna do? Past that analysis, I just don't think I can put them higher than 5th place because there's just not enough in the pitching department, and I think that's where I'll leave it for the Cincinnati Reds. My 4th place team, which I alluded to before, is the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I think that the offense might be a little bit worse here for Pittsburgh, but they still have a lot of great offensive weapons in Gregory Polanco, Starling Marte, Josh Bell, and even want to add in Josh Harrison and Corey Dickerson. So they have their options, but they lost Andrew McCutcheon. They don't really necessarily have this great firepower offense, and the hitting's probably going to be better in Cincinnati just because of where they play their games. PNC Park isn't as hitter-friendly, so while I like all those guys that I just mentioned, especially Polanco having a huge year, I think Bell could have a breakout sophomore season after a fantastic rookie year that might have been overlooked. So Starling Marte, a full season from him will be huge, and then being able to get Corey Dickerson to fill that role from Andrew McCutchen could be huge. I mean, he showed how many, he showed his powers and how many home runs he can hit last year with the Rays. So I think he could do the same thing in the National League. And then let's add the fact that Colin Moran is a guy they got for Garrett Cole. And I know the main guy we're going to talk about in a bit from that deal is Joe Musgrove, but Colin Moran actually just needed a place to play. And so if he has the chance to get as many at-bats as he can at third base over David Freese, I do like the prospects maybe of Colin Moran being a breakout player this season for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Onto that rotation. I think they have a better rotation than Cincinnati. That's why I have them a little bit higher. Ivan Nova, Jameson Taillon, and Joe Musgrove, I think, are really solid top 3 pitchers. And past that, you have some pretty good prospect guys in Stephen Brault and Tyler Glasnow who have high ceilings, but their floors are relatively really low because guys like they've really struggled in certain appearances. Tyler Glasnow's AAA numbers compared to his MLB numbers, it's almost like they're not even the same person. I mean, the ERA is ridiculous in the MLB, or in the MLB, and then it's even more ridiculous in the AAA in the worst way. Like, or should we wait? That's reversed. I believe that's reversed. So his AAA ERA from last season is ridiculous because of how good it is. It's insane how well he pitched in AAA, and his ERA in the majors is so ridiculous that it's above 5. I mean, that's how bad he has been in his time in the major leagues and pro baseball. So, Stephen Brault has had his moments, and then Chad Kuhl and Trevor Williams, who are probably going to actually get the spots out of spring training at 4 and 5. They've been good, but not great, and I'm not going to necessarily say that they're going to be these great back-end pitchers that really make a difference for a team. In fact, it'd be the opposite. They'll make the difference of not being in a division or wild card race. So I don't have that much faith in Pittsburgh Pirates this year, who unfortunately probably will be back in their not competing for the playoff spot that they had been in for a long time over the years. So the guy who's the guy we really contribute to that? Andrew McCutchen, and he is gone. So I think it's kind of, providing justice of, all right, the McCutchen era is over, and the Pirates might be reverting back into the loser type mentality. But I don't necessarily see them as a terrible team. I think they could hover around 500. That's why I think the rest of the division actually will be well over 500 in a wild card and division race. Third place, I want to put them higher, but I really don't know if I can. I think there's parts of the other two teams that I have higher that I like a little bit better than this team, but I think that the Milwaukee Brewers, who were in first place for a long time, if you forgot about last year, they were in first place for, I believe, I would say 70% of the season. Now, I could be wrong, but it just gets us a hunch. It was a long time they were in first place over the Chicago Cubs, and the Cubs came back and won the division in the end, and that's all we remember. But this was a team that was playing really well, and they went out and they made their team better. They get Christian Yelich from the Miami Marlins. They signed Lorenzo Cain. So now your outfield is Yelich, Cain, and Domingo Santana, who had a breakout year last year, who actually came over from the Houston Astros in a trade. That's how good Houston's prospect system was, is their leftovers, but did a really good job for another team. We're going to see that continuing to happen, like I mentioned with Colin Moran in Pittsburgh. And then Travis Shaw had a really good year. Eric Timms came back over from playing, I believe, in Japan, and he did a really good job in America the last year. It kind of fizzled out after the hot start, but he did a good enough job. You have Ryan Braun now, who's going to probably play first base and play in the outfield when the others needed a rest. And then Jesus Aguilar as a backup as well is a decent option there at first base. Travis Shaw, Orlando Arcia, and Eric Sogard. I mentioned Shaw. Those are pretty good infielders. Jonathan VR, who could fill in at second base. He's got a really good speed. Arcia could be really good at shortstop after a couple a season and a half in the major leagues so far. Has been just pedestrian, but he's got a really high ceiling. And then Hernan Perez, I think, is an underrated utility guy for them. So keep your eye on that. Onto the rotation, Chase Anderson had a really good year last year, and I think he could do it again this season, but he doesn't necessarily have that ace of the staff stuff. He's not going to be your Clayton Kershaws, your Madison Bumgarners, and the ones that are really going to be flashy at the top of that rotation, but he's done a really good job, and there's no reason to think he can't be that again this year. Zach Davies is a similar thing. He doesn't necessarily have this flashy stuff, but he does get the job done, and if he can continue to do that this year, as well as guys like Juicy Chassin, Brent Suter, and Wade Miley, and if Jimmy Nelson can come back from his shoulder surgery, I think you still have a decent enough rotation, but that's the reason why. I think the rotation's a little bit more suspect. Brandon Woodruff had moments last year, but he also struggled. So if they can get 3 people to step up and be really good, and then guys like Woodruff, Miley, and Suter can be decent at the 4 and 5, they might still be able to have good enough offense to put them in position to win this division. But because of the fact of the matter is that pitching rotation isn't necessarily as good as some of the guys are at the top of these other 2 rotations that we'll talk about in a little bit. That's why I had to put them in 3rd place. But I love what they did in their outfield with LeCain and Yelich, and I think they're going to continue to do a good job offensively to help them win, keep them in ball games, and get them the victories. And the bullpen, I think the unheralded part of this team last year was their bullpen, actually. Corey Newble, he did fantastic in the closing role last season, just absolutely sensational. He was a top 5 closer, if not top 3 closer. Josh Hader is a Chris Sale type lefty that they're going to keep in the bullpen for now. Don't be surprised if Hader ever becomes a starter, but for this season, it looks like he's going to be a reliever along with Matt Albers and Boone Logan, who are really good guys in the bullpen. And then Junior Guerra probably will be a long relief pitcher who probably be a good job to eat up some innings as well. So they have a pretty darn good bullpen in Milwaukee. That will be the part that could differentiate themselves and get them higher than the 3 spot that I have them in now. 2nd place, that's going to be the St. Louis Cardinals. I actually picked this team to win the division last year, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, wow, you did that. And maybe the Cubs barely won the division, so I was kind of right on the Cubs weren't going to be as good as they were in 2016, but I was wrong about this Cardinals team. They went out, and they actually did a little bit. They addressed some issues that they have as well. They bring in Marcell Ozuna, trade as well with that Miami Marlins team, so the Miami Marlins squad is going to actually affect the NL Central a little bit more, a lot, actually. So Tommy Pham, breakout year last year. He's a guy who's going to play center field for sure for them. And then right fielder Dexter Fowler, who the Cubs actually missed at the top of their lineup. So that's huge. If he can be 100% healthy this season, I love what he can bring. Guys like Jed Gurko and Paul DeJong did really good last year in breakout parts, and they can take another step forward. That will be huge for this team as well. Colton Wong at second base. If he can get a 2020 season this year, that would be the best you're expecting, but you're really expecting more of a guy who can get you some pop from the position at 10 to 15 home runs, and then hopefully be able to steal 15 bases as well. So that's what you're hoping from Colton Wong, but he really hasn't shown that he's ever going to give that to you, but he's a solid second baseman to boot, and or just in the end. And then Matt Carpenter at first base, he's been very consistent, but there are some injury concerns with him as well, and we all know what Yadi Molina does behind the plate. So there's a good, they have a decent offense. Don't forget about Jose Martinez as the outfielder, who's had a low-key really good year for them off the bench as a pinch hitter and as a 4th outfielder. If they go to Harrison Bader at some point this season, he also could be a good prospect in the outfield as well. So I have my concerns about this offense, but I do think with the acquisition of Marcell Ozuna that it will be good enough to get them enough runs. It's the pitching staff that I really love, and then the bullpen actually has gotten a little bit better, which was, Sung-Hwan Yo was not very good at the end of last season. He's off the bullpen. So now I'm on the top of the bullpen. Luke Gregerson, Tyler Lyons, I think at the back end of the bullpen would be really good for them. A guy I really love that they're probably going to end up with in their bullpen is Alex Reyes. He's a top prospect for them. He'll probably be a starting pitcher. Definitely be a starting pitcher in 2019. But this year, he'll be coming out of the bullpen almost like Severino was in 2016 from the Yankees late in the year after he came back from his injury. A guy who's going to not necessarily be a reliever for a long time, but he's going to be a reliever for them mostly this year, and he throws so hard that he'll be a fantastic relief pitcher for them at some point this season. So that's what I really like about this Cardinals team and the difference maker he could be in the bullpen. Rotation-wise, though, I think you're looking at Carlos Martinez, Michael Wacha, and Luke Weaver as a really solid top 3 part of this rotation. I think actually the worst out of those 3 is Michael Wacha, and he had a sensational, I'm not going to say sensational, I'll tone that down a little bit. A really good year last for them and a bounce-back year from a kind of a shaky 2016. Adam Wainwright really hasn't been the same guy for a few years now, but I think he's looked really good in spring training, so I'm not necessarily going to say we're going to get the same Wainwright because his fastball and his velocity is totally down, but I still think he could be a good enough, if you're asking him to be your number 4 starter, which he might be the 3rd guy off the on the mound to start game 3 of the season, but I still think Weaver's going to be better than him. If he's still your guy who prospects as your 4th starter, I really like it. And then you got a guy like Miles McCollum, who has come over, I believe, from Japan as well, similar to Eric Thims. And Miles has looked okay in spring training. He's had some hiccups, but he was dominant overseas. So look for him to be another guy that kind of comes out of nowhere for people to be like, well, maybe it's good to go to Korea or go to Japan and do a good job there, and then work your way up to come back into to the Major League Baseball. And do a good job. So I do think that their pitching is going to be better than Milwaukee, and that's going to get them where they are. But don't get me wrong, I do think Milwaukee will be right in the mix of things as well. And first place for the third year in a row, I do think it's going to be the Chicago Cubs. Listen, last year I was kind of like, maybe they won't be as good, and that's why I had them coming in second place. And they obviously showed me that they weren't as good, but they also showed me that when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, they can work their way into a first-place finish, even if they haven't been the same old team they were in 2016 in that particular year. So I look at them again and say they're talented enough to do the same thing. They could be, just lackadaisically going through a season all year, and then in August and September turning on to win the division again. That's why I'm not going to bet against them this year. I think that they're going to be better than they were last year, actually. So they're going to get back on track. And I think with Jake Arrieta gone, you bring in Yu Darvish. I think Darvish actually brings a little bit more to the table, to be honest. And I think a lot of people kind of look at Yu Darvish as a guy, as they're continuing just to look at him as the guy that got lit up in the World Series, especially game number 7, where he actually looked like he blew it for his team, which you can't deny he probably did in the end. But at the same time, he's a really good pitcher, and I think even regular season wise, he might not necessarily be the top of your guy and a guy you're going to rely on in the playoffs or their cup. I'm not talking about the playoffs right now. I'm talking about the regular season. He's going to be a very good player for them this year in the regular season, and I really like him in that rotation. So now that we're talking about the rotation, John Lester, I mean, I think he'll do better than he was. I'm not going to say he can't do worse than he did last year, because he was still the same John Lester we know, but not as good as he was maybe in that 2015 year. 2014 year with the A's and whatnot, and even the 2015 year with the Cubs or 2016. So he was a little off last year, but he's still John Lester. He's still going to be great at the top of this rotation. Kyle Hendricks is still an underrated guy. I mean, he doesn't have the flashy stuff as well, but he's still going to be good enough, I think, to get batters out. I think he won't have that 2 ERA that he did 2 years ago, but I think he'll be better this year, maybe around 3.25. And then Jose Quintana as a 4. That's a really good number 4 starter. Maybe he's even higher than that. Maybe Hendricks is your number 4. Either way, whoever's your number 4, you have a really good top 4 in Lester, Quintana, Darvish, Hendricks, whatever order you want to put them in. A sensational top 4 in the Chicago Cubs. That's why they're the number 1. And then even the number 5 guy, who I like, is Tyler Chatwood. He's coming out of Colorado, and he's in a really good spring training. And his ERA, his WHIP has been so much better pitching outside of Colorado over his last few years with the Rockies. Now, there's no reason not to think that he's going to do really well pitching most of his starts at Wrigley Field. So that's why Tyler Chatwood has a lot of good prospects moving forward with the Chicago Cubs team getting out of Colorado. So I like the rotation a lot. They could really be in every single game, because I think the rotation could be one of the best in the entire National League. Now, moving on to their offense, there is still that kind of question of who's going to hit leadoff. And I think the guy that's going to answer that bell is Ian Happ. He's had a really good spring training. And there's still a question of whether he will get the starting center field job or Albert Almora Jr. will. And I've always liked Albert Almora Jr., but I just think the better hitter right now is Ian Happ. I think he should get the starting center field job, and he would be a decent leadoff hitter, but it's still not your prototypical guy. I think if you're comparing one of those two to a Dexter Fowler, Albert Almora Jr. is more closer to Dexter Fowler and what he was able to do for them in their 2016 World Series champion year, and even their 2015 NLCS losing to the Mets year. So that being said, should Albert Almora get it because he's more similar to Dexter Fowler? No, I still think Ian Happ is a better hitter, and he can still do a good job at the leadoff. We know that Kyle Schwarber doesn't really work out there. I guess they didn't really like Anthony Rizzo, even though the couple of games that he did bat leadoff, he actually did hit pretty well. But that's just the type of age we are right now. I don't know what Madden's going to do with this team, but I really think Ian Happ deserves a starting center field job. Schwarber in left, Hayward in right. I think that there should be a leash for both of them, especially Schwarber, because he's still a professional hitter. But I think the leash could be short enough to say, hey, if one of you guys aren't performing, I know I love your defense out there in right field, Hayward. and I know I really love the prospect of your bat because it's a monster bat, Schwarber, but if one of them aren't really contributing the best offensively, or in Schwarber's case, maybe not the best defensively, maybe you go with Ben Zobrist or Almora, or the loser of Almora Happ, a little bit more than the other, because I think that as much as you like Hayward's defense in right field, it's one of the best in Major League Baseball. Should the better bat get it? And that's where it comes down to. If Hayward's not bad, I mean, listen, if Hayward's not batting, he's still going to get a lot of starts because of his glove. That's just the truth. And if Schwarber's not batting, he's going to get a lot of starts because of the prospects of his mammoth shots. But I really, really like what the depth of this team is, which includes Ben Zobrist and includes the loser of the Ian Happ Almora center field job. We all know Chris Bryant's great. We all know Anthony Rizzo's great at the corner positions. The middle infield, Addison Russell and Javier Baez, they really have had their struggles over last year. And I think that if one of them really puts it together and bats 270 and gets 25-plus home runs, this is where this team is going to be the best in baseball. But if they're both kind of 230-ish and they're not really have the greatest pop that they've been able to have, even if they get to 25 and still hit 230, I think you still need a guy, one of those two guys, to really step up and hit closer to 300 than and if both of them are doing it, they'll surefire be the best team in all of baseball. So I really like the prospect of both of them. They're really good defensively up the middle, but there's still kind of this, I don't know. And then obviously a great catcher in Wilson Contreras, hitting wise, and he's been very good at throwing runners out as well. No longer that controversy of Miguel Montero and with Jake Arrieta gone, calling out teammates about not holding runners on enough. But I digress there. Bullpen-wise, they bring in Brandon Morrow to take the Wade Davis and Aroldis Chapman position at closer. So which of those three would you rather have? I think Brandon Morrow is the number 3 on that list, but he did very good for them for the Dodgers last year as a setup man. So it'll be interesting how he kind of fills into a closer role, I believe, for the first time in his career. But he definitely has the stuff as a bullpen guy, there's another starter turned closer, similar to Wade Davis, and so I think he can do a really good job at the back end. And then it's still kind of the same old middle relief guys with Pedro Strop, Carl Edwards Jr., now Steve Cishek, Brian Dunsing, and Justin Wilson. I think they have a good enough bullpen, but it's still one of those things when it gets down to the playoffs. So when it gets to the playoffs, do you have enough dominant people in your bullpen? The answer to that question is no. But in terms of the regular season, those guys, I think, will do just fine in the regular season to hold the leads that they might be able to get, or even close games. I do like the 7, 8, 9 of Cishek, Strop, and Morrow. I think that's good enough to get it done. And then maybe Justin Wilson kind of going in matchup-wise with lefties. So I do like what the Cubs are going to do all over the place. They'll be the number 1 team in this division. I'm not going to make that mistake again, not picking them. And then I do believe, though, that they could be the best team in all of baseball. There's no shock there, really, especially even if you have a down year from either Rizzo or Bryant. There's just enough there. I mean, when those two are going the best, for sure they're going to be the best team in baseball. They're going to be one of the top teams in baseball, But if one of them's even having a bad year, I think they have enough to pick up the slack of some of them, some of their slumps. I just really do. I really do. And the pitching is good enough to not only win them some ball games, like they might steal games because of how good their pitching is all around. That's how good the Chicago Cubs team is. And I'll give you my final predictions of the playoffs. I'll give you my playoff team. So right now, you have the Cardinals and Brewers. I could have one or both in the playoffs. You'll have to find that on the last podcast that I do. That will be closer to opening day. I hope to get that one, the last one up, probably by March 25th or 26th. At the very latest. So look out for that last podcast where I'll give you my wild card teams, my World Series prediction, and my MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year predictions as well. So this one, these podcasts usually around 25 to 30 minutes. That last one that you see at 45 minutes, that's the one that is going to be the one where I give my take on whatever division it is. Only 3 divisions left, and then also my other predictions as well. Hope you listen to that one. Really, if you got to the end of this one and you enjoyed it, just listen to the other division. Even if you have no horse in that race, skip ahead. I'll put the time where I start talking about my wildcard teams at the bottom, and then the other World Series prediction and among others as well. So hopefully you check that one out, and hopefully if you're listening to this the day it comes out or the day after it comes out, you're in waiting in high anticipation for that last podcast. But for now, I'm Eric Hanneman for the Sittin Sportside podcast. Check out other Sittin Sportside podcasts throughout the MLB season and for the NBA, NHL playoffs coming up, and the NCAA tournament. Maybe some reaction podcasts from that coming up. So all your sports needs, Sittin Sportside podcast playlist on youtube.com. So it's Team 1045. There's also a link on 1045theteam.com under the podcasts tab. Click on the Sittin Sportside podcast. Once again, I'm Eric Hanneman. Thank you for listening to the Sittin Sportside podcast.